Good morning, everybody. You hear me?
Welcome also. Okay. Today, our sessions will be about oceans, ecosystem, marine ecosystem modeling, and we are going to start with the plenary session 1, called MBON, Ocean Biomes Monitoring and Marine Ecosystem Modeling, by Frank Muller-Karger, Adriano Lima, and Gail Forget. Frank Muller-Karger is a biological oceanographer as a professor at the College of Marine Science, University of South Florida. Muller-Karger conducts research on how marine ecosystems change in time. He uses time series of observations collected by traditional oceanographic methods and by satellite sensors to study changes in water quality, primary production, and biodiversity in coastal and marine ecosystems. This research helps in understanding how large-scale phenomena like climate change or other disturbances affect ecosystems, including people. The focus of his present work is to assess the importance of continental margins, including areas of upwelling, river discharge, and coral reefs in the global carbon budget. Muller-Karger combines the observations from different satellites to measure ocean color, sea surface temperature, winds, salinity, and sea surface elevation, and how these change. Uses field-based time series to measure the vertical structure of plankton and how particles settle in the ocean. Much of this work focuses on improving methods to measure the diversity of phytoplankton using remote sensing. Muller-Karger has worked hand in hand with K-12 teachers and students and the public to showcase these new technologies and to highlight the importance of the ocean in our daily lives. He has a keen interest in linking science and education and addressing the problem of underrepresentation of minorities in scientific research programs. Muller-Karger was appointed by President George W. Bush to serve on the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy in 2001. In 2005, he was appointed to the Ocean Studies Board of the National Research Council, National Academies. He previously received the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory Award for outstanding contributions on the NASA Administrator Award for exceptional contribution and service for supporting development of satellite technologies for Earth observation, for ocean observation, sorry. From August 2007 to August 2009, he served as the Dean of the School for Marine Science and Technology at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. He has a Bachelor of MSc and a PhD degrees in Marine Science and a Master's degree in Management, and has authored or co-authored over 120 scientific publications. Adrian Lima is a Senior Project Officer and MBON Scientific Programmer at the Air Center. He holds a PhD in Civil Engineering with emphasis on environmental hydraulics from Hokkaido University, Japan. He has experience working as assistant professor, principal researcher, and team manager with focus on computational fluid dynamics, data science, aquaculture, and multiple sectors of the blue economy. Finally, Gail Forget currently works as a research scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the Department of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences. Research interests and expertise include satellite observations, ocean robots, marine ecosystems, ocean physics, numerical modeling, and estimation in general. Created the Julia Ocean and Julia Climate organizations, is a lead developer of a series of Julia packages focused on ocean and climate science, and these include mesh arrays, climate models, and ocean robots. So let's start. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I guess I still hear an echo. Oh, great. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for the invitation to present to you. This is a collaboration that we have that is very, very close and actually is led by the Air Center in the Azores. And what I'm going to talk to you is something that is going to take many years to build, and it needs everybody's help because it is an attempt to try to organize people, the biological community in particular, to try to collect data in a specific way, more organized than what we're doing now, sharing the data in standard formats, precisely to help feed data into forecasts of biology and ecology. So many of the things that we do depend on life in the ocean, including our own, and yet we don't have a good way to organize the data to forecast ecology. So I'm going to share my screen. I hope that this works. And if somebody can tell me if that works, I would really appreciate that. Perfect. So the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network is led by Joanna Suarez, the Executive Secretary at the Air Center, and I'm Frank Muller-Karger at the University of South Florida. As I mentioned before, at present, there's a few system efforts here and there to collect biological data. It's very scattered. Most of the world is not covered, and many of the countries, especially in the global south, have little data. If you go to the interior of the ocean, as you remember, the ocean covers about 70+% of our planet, and it's about 4 kilometers deep on average. And yet most of that is not sampled routinely for especially for biology. There's a lot of physical data, but not a lot of physical data below 2,000 meters. And there's hardly any biological data. The more deep you go, the worse the situation gets. And the worst thing is also that in biology, there are no accepted standards or conventions on how to collect specific kinds of data, of how to organize the data, data formats, and the databases that we have established to collect these data are still pretty empty of data in the middle of the ocean. So this is an issue, no? So what we would like to do in working with MBON is to organize a community to address these issues, to fill these gaps, to provide the data in standardized ways so that we can not only measure biology and the diversity of life in the ocean, but also see how it's changing. The issue is that a lot of us depend on marine life. There's a lot of food that is derived from the ocean, but there's also medicines, there's materials, there's a requirement in many cases to maintain a certain level of health in the ocean. So many of the other industries that may not use life directly have to report about the status of life or how it's impacted. All of that we call the blue economy or the economy of the ocean at the moment is estimated to provide about $1.5 to $2.5 trillion a year in benefits to humanity and a lot of jobs, millions of jobs. And yet that is still growing. It is estimated to grow to over $3 trillion by 2030. So this is the decade that we have to organize this in a better way and make this more effective, more profitable, and at the same time help and conserve those resources for the future. So it's that balance between conservation and development that is called sustainable that we are trying to address. The Marine Biodiversity Observation Network is a global community. We're trying to establish this community of practice to collect observations in a way that is that follows protocols, not only for how you collect the data, but also how you store the data. So data formatting is essential. And all of this is to disseminate the data in a way that is open and free so that you can feed models. It's the same thing that we do for weather, where you have a system that provides data on a routine basis daily to feed weather forecasting. Again, this is all organized through the Air Center in Terceira on the Azores. The Marine Biodiversity Observation System is sort of a tiered structure. It depends on what we call the Group on Earth Observations Biodiversity Observation Network, and that is part of GEO, the Group on Earth Observations. This is, I'm going to share this presentation, so if you're interested in this set of activities, you can register through it through GeoBond. Now, the entire concept is based on what we call essential variables. Essential variables is not necessarily a completely new system. It's already almost 10 to 15 years old. And it comes from the idea that there's a few measurements that you can collect to track climate and weather and see how things are changing. So initially there was an essential climate variables set. And these essential climate variables include land, atmosphere, oceans, and the oceanic climate variables are called essential ocean variables. So the essential ocean variables are managed by, so the definition, all the prescribed, what is it that you need to collect is managed by the Global Ocean Observing System, which is part of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. These specifications are then walked out to the community, and somebody has to organize the community to collect the data, and that's what MBON is trying to do. As part of the essential climate variables that deal with the ocean, so basically the essential ocean variables, there's a subset that deals with biology. These are what we call the biology and ecosystem essential ocean variables, or bioeco EOVs. The idea is to collect these in a systematic way around the world in a way that you can make maps. So right now, if you make maps of biology or which species lives where, as I mentioned, it's difficult to see that over time. So the eventual goal, or the goal, is to eventually have maps of different biological variables and biodiversity that change over time. So you can track things and see how they're related to physical and biogeochemical variables. So these maps that are maps of biological data are what we call essential biodiversity variables. So you can imagine that you can make maps of genetic composition of species around the world, of species traits like length, color, the phenology or how they vary over time, of migration, the community composition, and eventually, if you mix that with the physical and biogeochemical variables, you have ecosystem structure and ecosystem function. All of those things are what we call essential biodiversity variables. An example of what we call the bioeco essential ocean variables is shown here, and you can see that it covers microbes to whales, basically. So you have phytoplankton, zooplankton, fish, and so on, but also coastal habitats like corals, macroalgae, seagrasses, and mangrove. All of these things have an importance for humans. The idea is then to collect data in a way that is already planned to be shareable, to control the quality of the data and put it in a format that is standardized. And I don't know to what extent in this workshop you will learn how to do that, but there are several protocols that we use. For example, for taxonomy, we use something called Darwin Core, and Darwin Core is a data formatting protocol that has evolved over time originally from museum collections to now storing in a digital fashion and very interoperable data about the abundance of organisms, their productivity, their rate of growth, the different things that are related to an organism or groups of organisms, and that you can combine then with physical data like temperature, salinity, chemical data like oxygen or nutrients. You can then export that data. If it's standardized in a format, you can easily develop different ways to view it, and that can be used by many people around the world in a way that you don't have to know a lot about the data, but you can use common tools. We also bring in satellite data into this process. So many of the essential biodiversity variables that we're developing now combine different types of satellite data. So we have something called seascapes. Seascapes are effectively a clustered product of temperature, salinity, winds, sea surface height, and a number of ocean color or parameters derived from the color of the ocean. We call that ocean color, and you can derive indices of chlorophyll, productivity, and including the radiation that reaches the ocean. So basically irradiance. You can get maps like you have at the bottom here. This is the bottom tip of Florida, where we're trying to go with ships and validate these clusters to show or understand what the relationship is with life. Darwin Core is one of these formats that is very mysterious to people, but it's very simple. It's just a table with specific columns, and the column titles are very well specified and managed. And we put the data, we collect the data through a number of electronic methods and put it into a database called OBIS, Ocean Biodiversity Information System. There's another parallel database where a lot of terrestrial data goes. That's the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, or GBIF. And both of them together complement the global data sets for biodiversity. So we're trying to link in the same way with the same formats, terrestrial, freshwater, and marine observations. So all of these are just examples of how you would walk basically the data flow for biological data. So you take data like satellite observations or taxa observations. You use a specific format, be it Darwin Core or NetCDF for weather or physical data. Even the biological data can be stored in NetCDF files, and then you put it into databases that are interlinked. Then a lot of people can use it using common tools. But eventually, what we're looking is for these maps that you can stack and see how different variables and different properties, different characteristics of life are changing over time. This is, I think, exactly what you're learning in this workshop. One of the ways that we try to advance this in a community of practice is through mechanisms that reach a lot of people. And one of them is the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, or what we call the Ocean Decade. The Ocean Decade started in 2021, so now we're in the third year and moving toward 2030. So we are supposed to change the way that we do business and ocean information to service the sustainable development needs of people around the world. So this is not only development, but conservation at the same time. What do we need to manage in a better way, be it through marine protected areas or understanding where animals or organisms grow or how they migrate, and putting that all together with physical data for the purpose of managing business in a way that is sustainable over the long term. And that has a heavy concentration of conservation. One of the programs that we put together, again, with the Air Center and the Azores, is something called Marine Life 2030. And so that's the program that tries to bring many different partners from around the world, from industry, the public, artists, biologists, you name it. We're all trying to talk to each other under Marine Life 2030. So this is to address the challenges of the Ocean Decade. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but the decade has these challenges that are very relevant to sustainable development. So this is MBON. I hope that I gave you a flavor. If you want to join, please write to Joanna Suarez, she's executive secretary, or register through GeoBond, or write me directly, or talk to Adriano Lima. Any one of us can tell you a little bit more about this. Thank you.
Okay, once again, thank you, Frank, and I'll proceed now with my presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Adriano Lima, and I'm a scientific programmer in the MBON, the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network that Frank just presented. Okay. And also senior project officer at the Air Center. Okay, tá bem, okay. So as Frank briefly introduced, the Air Center hosts the Secretariat of MBON, a position held by Joanna, who's just there today. Yes, and this is an agreement not only between the MBON and the Air Center, but also the Azores Regional Fund for Science and Technology. Okay. This is some of the goals which I am pursuing within the scope of both MBON and Air Center. We do several things, but this is what I would say it's most relevant for what we're doing in this workshop. Essential development, maintenance, and management of a system to process space-derived data products for a variety of applications. And these applications, as you expect, should be of high quality. Eventually, you'd like people to take decision using our products. a very strong work front of the S Center, satellite imagery. This has been previously introduced by you from João. This is the construction of our DRS. This is Interstellar Island in our technology park. And last year we received our first images. This is our room. And finally, from data, we produce further data using both these satellite products, so satellite-derived imagery and data, and in situ oceanographic instruments. I'll proceed now with state-of-the-art and also some forthcoming products which were developed within the scope of MBON. If you go to the, it's not showing. Okay. How can I show the browser? How can I show a browser? Shall I share the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay. So this is the MBON website. If you go here to data and products, you see the catalog of products which have been developed essentially by the US MBON. Among several cool stuff that you can find here, I would like to highlight the tool products, which can be understood as building blocks for constructing applications. And this is something that Julia could contribute. As far as I know, this is not being used. And this is a margin for expansion, where I'd be interested in knowing how Julia could contribute to these products. Okay. Okay. So again, you have seen this slide 2 days ago. One way of putting together all these developments that we would like to pursue is to come up with a relevant product. And for that, we have chosen marine protected areas as targets for these developments. In the Azores, we had several areas which were created in the last, starting 1980s, but particularly in the last decades. We have a big number now of marine protected areas serving different purposes, some coastal, some high seas, some with areas which are just a few hectares, while others are bigger than mainland Portugal. Unfortunately, not commonly to the Azores, but in many places worldwide, these marine protected areas could be working better. They could be more well managed. And beyond this, now we have this goal of having 30% protection by 2030. So more marine protected areas will most likely be created, but still you have to manage what exists already. And here we wrap up several sources of data and information, from in situ sensors located in vessels or fishing nets to online tools such as the global fish watching the seascapes, to radar-based images, ship detection tools, etc. We can serve several instances that would support the proper management and directive of marine protected areas. So this is where the asset fits, not only in this initiative, but others, is to operationalize data flows. And a key point to do this is to have a robust end user engagement and co-creation. So if you really want the MPA managers and other stakeholders to use our data to get information and to eventually take decision, we must know what do they need. We must know what do they want, and we must know how we could improve our offer of data and data products. So to strengthen this pipeline, we bridge the technical implementations, which is our side, and we hear our stakeholders, what would they need. So among all these offer of products, what could be the key points for improvement? What kind of data, what resolutions, etc., that would be helpful for them to conduct activities. So we have come up with a pipeline for engaging end users. The first one would be identifying who are these end users and what policies and directives would apply for marine protected areas. But not only that, sectors in the blue economy. Here in the Azores, particularly, the fisheries are very important, as well as tourism, like whale watching, etc. We have several different directives applying to the marine protected areas, sometimes more than one to the same marine protected areas. So they have already target species or conservation targets, and these have to be complied, but also in many cases, they still don't have this clearly. And this is also something that we have to help. Finally, identification of tasks. In many cases, even the needs of the user is not clear for the users themselves. So you have to have a way to make people understand what is available and how these already state-of-the-art and forthcoming products could support managers. So information needs essentially data, physical data, biochemistry, and fisheries, which is very relevant for the Azores, but several others, biodiversity. For specific services, what would be the optimal time for this information to be displayed to the user? You need real time or near real time. Is it okay to be every 1 week? If you want to detect, for example, a fishing vessel which entered the marine protected area in a season that shouldn't be there, for example, should be as early as possible, for example. Finally, we try to match existing and forthcoming offers of data products. We have several available repositories for data and several tools, the ones I just showed in the MBON website, Copernicus, etc. And matching these with the management experience for the users or the potential users of these products. And finally, come up with innovative services. That's our goal, to make sure that people will use all this cool stuff that we are developing here. So that's all for now. If you have any questions. So, if not, then I'll give the floor to Gal. Yes. Let's see. Yeah. All right.
So hello, everybody. Before I start, I'd like to thank both of the previous speakers and MBON for sponsoring this workshop. I'm very glad that we can have this. So I'm going to tell you about something a little different in the way of we went from observations. We're going to now talk about the modeling side of things on the same theme. So I'm going to tell you about the Biomes collaboration, which is my sponsor for being here. Then I'm going to go through a few case studies, and then I'm going to dig a little deeper into the modeling side. So Biomes stands for it's a project funded by the Simons Foundation. Biomes is the collaboration on computational biochemical modeling of marine ecosystems. And right under the logo, you see a brief definition of what we're trying to do. So we seek to develop and apply quantitative models of the structure and function of marine microbial communities at seasonal and basin scales. I would say also at the smaller scales, in fact. And I'll just mention briefly that we are interested in Julia collectively, and with a colleague of mine, Shen Wu, we are running a little Julia club kind of amongst ourselves. If you want more information on Biomes or the Simons Foundation, I put 2 links here that will be in the presentation that I will share. To illustrate what we do in Biomes, I've selected 4 studies from folks that were postdocs in our group, and I've done some great work in relation to the marine ecosystem. And so the first one by Mike Iseneveld was a machine learning exercise that resembles a little bit what was described by Frank in terms of the seascapes, although with somewhat more involved machine learning methods, and focusing more on the on a detailed description of the marine ecosystem. Chris Follett was looking at the seasonally moving boundaries inside of the marine ecosystems as seen by the satellites. The same theme, although with a slightly different twist, was explored by Greg Britton. And then Justin Yoon looked at a problem that is, how do you compare 2 images, essentially? There is something called the Earth mover's distance, which is a way to do that. And this was an application of this optimal transport methods to comparing 2 maps of chlorophyll data. To highlight the Julia side, I've put 3 links. One is to the workshop that I ran with 2 colleagues. I think I should be able to click it. Let me see. Yeah. At JuliaCon in 2021. So this was done with Benoît Pasquier and Zhen Wu. There's a 3-hour session for you to watch if you're interested in this. So this was an example of a Julia workshop in relation to this work. Where is my? I've put the link to a Julia package called Ocean Color Data, which does the following. I'm going to, I think, go straight here. So Ocean Color Data right now is a small package. It provides methods to go from the remotely sensed reflectances and the irradiances, the signals that the satellite gets, say in the OCCCI data sets, for example, you have these variables, to go from this to chlorophyll A. And then there's a couple of classification methods that are also included in there, specifically the one from Tom Jackson that was developed at PML in the UK, which is one of the partners within Biomes. Plankton individuals, which I don't think they've opened. Plankton individuals is a modeling framework. It's what's called an agent-based model, where we both represent in detail a population of plankton, as well as the surrounding conditions from a Eulerian point of view. And it's a model that runs both on CPUs and GPUs, and that we think has a lot of potential. This is the work by and large by Zhen Wu, and I contributed a little bit. All right. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I think about the modeling of marine ecosystems in general. So I would term this digital twins for ocean robots. This is in fact a presentation I gave here 6 months ago in this same room in a different context. And so I want to simulate observing systems. So for example, if you have an instrument that's drifting at sea, you might want to represent it as follows. You have an equation that gives you the displacement as a function of the currents and time, and then you integrate that forward. If you have something that floats, for example, like a surface buoy, you can account for that by keeping that to the surface. But in general, it's a three-dimensional problem. We will be coming back to this topic more in detail tomorrow in the hands-on session on simulating these sort of things. So this would be my simulation of observing system vessels, things we put at sea to observe the ocean. Could be a mooring as well, just simplifies the equation a little bit. And then you need to be able to simulate sensors. So here I've put a lot of things. I'm not going to go in detail, but these are the sort of things we want to simulate. So that goes from just a simple thermometer to something that would be like a chemostat put on a float. I'll get back to this in a second. And we want to also have modules for AI as part of this whole effort, as we are trying to replicate what you might term edge computing. Here is the model hierarchy that I'm considering, and I'm going to walk you through this in detail in a second. But the idea is to be able to line up all of those models to go from a climate scenario to a set of observations that can be fairly complex, but simulated by the computer. And so it goes as follows. On the left, you have the physics. I have this package that's written in Julia called climatemodels.jl. That is essentially a framework to drive models of all sorts of types. So with this, essentially, I can run any of the pieces there, and I can line them up one after the other. This is an example of a simplified climate model that is in the form now of a Pluto notebook where you can click and play with it, change the parameters and change the climate in the future. Once you have that, you can inject this into a model of ocean circulation that will distribute. In this case, this is a plot of ocean heat transport over the globe. So similarly, if you have an anomaly due to global warming, you can propagate that in the ocean. The next element is to adopt this more so-called Lagrangian point of view, where you're following an instrument along the fluid. So again, we will get back to this tomorrow, but this is typically the marine litter problem, where you have stuff that's floating near the surface, and so it feels really the currents near the surface, and it tends to converge in very specific regions. So we'll go through this one tomorrow. As you'll notice, this is pretty smooth, and that is because in this simplified example, I'm just using a climatology of the ocean circulation. But ultimately, we also want to account for things like this, which are those much narrower, smaller scale contrasts in both the ocean currents as well as the properties that robots or marine ecosystem might encounter. There's a link to this figure. So if you click on it, you'll get to YouTube, where you'll find this movie. I'm just going to run it for you from the screen because it's a little nicer this way. So this is something that I've done with Maki, in fact, that was presented yesterday by Simon and Lazaro. You're looking at a map of temperature near the surface from which I have computed temperature gradients. So just the point here is to get from this very high resolution model output, the sense of the temperature jumps that a marine ecosystem might encounter. So any of those little wiggles here, that's a little filament in the ocean. And we now have models that can generate these sort of things over the entire planet. This is something that's been carried out by my colleagues at NASA JPL, the model simulation. And so if I stop here, I think I have the Azores somewhere in this part. And we can do that over the entire planet. And based on Julia, we are able to analyze and visualize these data sets in a way that I would suggest is not so bad. If somebody is better than me, they'll do better. All right. So coming back to this. So I'm a little bit behind on time. So all of this is essentially for the physics, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the biology and the biochemistry, the way we represent it. First, we have a physics simulation. We can then drive a biology and biochemistry model from that. So this is a representation of the marine ecosystem discretization in the model that I'm currently using. This is from the work by Stephanie Dukevich and colleagues, and Mick Follows and colleagues in our department. Well, leads of the sea biomes program. What you're looking at here is, I think there is in this one 35 phytoplankton types and 16 zooplanktons. There's an axis for functional groups and an axis for size. So it's a highly resolved model in terms of the marine ecosystem. It also has, so it's been run on different model resolutions, and it also has a complete or very detailed representation of the way that radiation is penetrating through the surface and through the ocean. And so that allows us to compare with satellite data and in situ data that are of bio-optical nature. This is an example of the classification work. The second kind of model is the one I've mentioned before, and this is from Zhenbu's work. Here's the physiology in the agent-based model. And so we are taking this and we are running this, for example, on a little floating device that's going to move around, which is a way to allow us to estimate growth rates, which are hard to observe from the way that the ecosystem reacts. So all put together, we're talking about simulations of innovative observing systems like this, where you'd imagine you have a set of instruments drifting near the sea surface, and each one of them would have a way to experiment with growth rate and measure it through aquacosan experiments. Here is another example of the things we're interested in. Here you have a estimation on the left of chlorophyll time series from chlorophyll data. On the right, the same thing, but estimated by observing a bunch of other variables and predicting chlorophyll through a neural network. So we want to be able to anticipate the way that an observing system like this would behave. That would be a float or drifter where we would have an AI to predict certain variables we cannot, or we don't want to directly observe. I'll just finish with this to highlight the fact that this is not something far in the future. What I'm describing, this sequence of modeling, it is basically there. The only thing that's expensive to run, expensive meaning more than, say, a few hours, is the kilometer scale model, the one I showed you the animation of. Everything else you can essentially run on a small cluster or your laptop. And we have a lot of the technology ready through a lot of different Julia packages. So here I'm listing some that have to do with files. Dataverse.gl is something I created recently to interact with the Dataverse platform. NC datasets was sort of already talked about. It's about netcdf files. For animation and visualizations, we have things like Maki and Pluto that are outstanding, in my opinion. For interactivity, again, we can rely on sort of those two frameworks. And the cloud computing structure, or the way that we allow people to replicate our computations, is also in place. In fact, that's the reason why we are using Docker in this conference, is because I've worked on it before. And I would say the last piece that I kind of need to put together is web apps and APIs. Again, there's a lot of different Julia solutions for this. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Yes, it is. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope I didn't take too much time. Thank you.
Okay, so time for a little coffee break. We'll be back at 10:15. Okay. Thank you. Okay, hi again to everyone. We are now going to the hands-on session on regional ocean data with Gail Forget and André Valente, but also Emmanuel Castanho. We'll start with the gathering reader data over ocean provinces, followed by sea level and drifting buoys near Azores. Gail was already presented, so André Valente is a physical oceanographer interested in satellite remote sensing applications. He specializes in the integration of satellite, model, and in situ data for applications such as the study of ocean climate variability and physical biological interactions. He holds a PhD in environmental sciences from the University of Azores and a degree in geophysical sciences from the University of Lisbon. He is currently working at the Earth Observation Lab of the Earth Center and previously worked at the University of Lisbon, where he was team member of several projects, such as the recent ESA Ocean Color Climate Change Initiative. Emmanuel Castanho holds a master's degree in aeronautical engineering from the University of Beira Interior in Covilhã. Currently, he works at the EO Lab as a project developer in projects such as the Aeros, EcoBlue, LabPlash, Port 21, AK2D. His main focus is to use programming as a main tool to handle remote sensing data, in particular optical satellite data, in order to fight real problems, plastic pollution and climate change, for example. Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. So hello everybody online, and hi again to everybody who's here also. So today we are doing this session where we're going to have 3 parts. I'm going to run this for the beginning, and then we're going to sort of take turns. We're going to look at a series of notebooks that you will find, in fact, for the most part, already within the Docker image. They're coming from this web page here, which is the JuliaEO notebooks web page. So if I show you on GitHub, the information about this is in a README file now within the repository of the workshop. So this is a, sorry for that. This is just to show you the Julia Climate organization as it is. It has a bunch of packages in there that we're going to use. And at the top of it, it has this notebooks link. So the notebooks links give you this web page. This is also where the Docker instance, that the Docker image that we're using, in fact, comes from. And so these go together. And if you scroll down in this page, you will find a long list of notebooks. We're going to focus on a couple of them. They're all Pluto notebooks. And the way this works out, for example, I'm looking for one specifically. Sorry. Yeah. So the way this works out is you have links to the notebook itself. So if you have never seen a Pluto notebook, this is what they are. There you go. So the notebooks themselves are actually text files. They have a lot of things that you've already seen, like these using packages at the beginning. And importantly, at the end, the Pluto notebooks contain their own list of dependencies. And so that's one of the reasons why they're very practical. You give the name of the file or the URL to somebody, and they can reproduce it. So in this case, for example, we're going to use packages called Kairomaki, which we talked about yesterday, Ocean Robots, and Pluto UI, which is going to give us interactivity. So in this web page, if you grab this URL, you will be able to put it inside of the Pluto command line. I'll do that in a second, but I want to show you also the rendering of the notebooks once they are processed. So this is the sort of things that we should have at the end. Once it's run, this is the static HTML version of it. So this is not interactive, but this is once the notebook has run. All right, so then what do I do next? Okay. So this is our Docker instance, the same one that we've been using. I have, in fact, started a bunch of the notebooks beforehand, so I did not have, so that I would not have any latency. But the idea again is if you're in the, so all of those are open. So this one is already open for me. But like I said, to open a new notebook, you take your URL and just paste it here and you click open. The other thing I want to show here at this point is, in fact, a bunch of the notebooks are already there. So you can get them from file. For example, they're all the one I'm going to use in this notebooks folder. And then say, Ocean Robots is the one that had the one I was looking at. Oops. And so this is here, and you, again, you do enter, and it's going to fire up, right? So this is how Pluto notebooks are operated. I'm going to get maybe one that I have not started to show you what you might expect. Let's see. Let's do this one. When you open them, there's going to be a little bit of time that's going to take to run every cell, essentially, unless you do a special trick. And so right now you're looking at a page where, in this case, you're seeing that this cell is getting evaluated. So these are all of the packages, the Julia packages that are used in this particular notebook. So here, the same one we talked about, except there's also Geomaki, data frames, JSON3, and HTTP. And the reason why there is that this notebook interrogates an API from something I will talk about a little more tomorrow, which is somewhat related to the concepts that we talked about with MBON in terms of coordinating the global observing system, something called OceanOps. And so this particular notebook is going to give us the current coverage by floats, the planned cruises at sea, all sorts of kind of oceanographic operations that have taken place, are taking place, or will take place. There we go. So this is, for example, what you get from this API of OceanOps. I'll talk more about this tomorrow, so don't worry about it, but I wanted to show you the latency of the notebook is going to load. So that's why I preloaded all of them. And so I'm going to start now with the greeted data story. And then we're going to go through a few of them. So let me start here. So greeted data, the grids can be simple or they can be complex. In general, the more broadly used data products tend to be on a lat long grid because that's very simple to use. People know how to plot it immediately. And so we end up doing that as well. But in our case, that would be for the modelers, but also for the satellite people, we start generally from a different grid that's more convenient to our needs. So I'm going to show you a little bit where the sort of hoops that we jump through with this kind of complex model output. The point is not to worry about it. This mesh arrays package is there specifically to handle the kind of output I'm talking about. One more thing about Pluto, you can hide the code, and by default, I tend to hide it such that I can just tell you the story and show you the code when I need it. So if you wonder why you don't see more code, it's because it's hidden from you for communication purposes. The Julia packages used in this case, I've already mentioned it. Nothing particularly complicated. So this tutorial is going to take a set of gridded output from this model that we use with the NASA project called ECHO. And this is out of the MIT GCM, the MIT General Circulation Model. This is an example here of a gridded domain. I think I'll probably play with this. This didn't react, okay. So we have a gridded domain, and then we tend to split it up in different tiles that we tend to call them. So here there is 8. If I change this, should be less. No, I'm getting myself confused, so never mind. Why do we do this sort of domain decomposition? Well, it allows us to put a model on a distributed computing platform where each processor does its own thing on a subdomain. And this is an example of the kind of grids that we end up using out of a cube sphere. So for example, you might see here that this looks like America, both North and South America, except it's weirdly oriented. This is Antarctica, right? And so the whole sphere is discretized and split up in this sort of strange way. Again, don't worry too much about it because we're going to simplify that at the end by interpolating. This is the one that we use for the global model. So instead of 6 faces of a cube, it has 5. Never mind. The point is you do interpolation and now you're safe. You're in your usual space. So the interpolation in my case comes down to this function. The mesh arrays package essentially is something that has a subset of the capabilities that you would like to have in terms of geospatial analysis more broadly for gridded data. But very specifically, it's targeting a set of configuration and grids that rather than trying to solve the general problem. And so this little function is sort of similar to what you will find in other software. You sort of look within your grid cell, do a bunch of polygon operations to figure out where you are, identify grid points, get coefficients, and then you interpolate. By the end, you have this sort of things. And now we can go ahead and analyze things in a much simpler way. So this is the sequence of operations for the interpolation. So this, maybe I should make this a little bigger. This here, right? This variable is the interpolated one. So that is just should be just a flat array. Maybe I have too many notebooks open. It will show up, I think, eventually. The rest here, I don't really need to talk about. I'd just like to see this array. No, it's not cooperative. Anyway, So I'll move on to the next topic in this case, which I should have here. How much time? So there is, in this series of notebooks about the gridded arrays, you will find two more. One is called, I'm going to open it now, I guess. Geography. So geography is going to be taking this sort of output that's been now interpolated and easy to use, and is going to display it in a projection type of framework. I will let this load, and I will get back to it afterwards. There is a vector one. So by vector, I mean something slightly different than you would in the geospatial context. Oops, sorry. I'll open that one too. And I will explain in a minute. I should be able to go to here and show you how it looks at the end, if I can find it. There we go. We shall see. I need to bring this one over there. Oops. We do have here, for those who have not been with us, a Wi-Fi that is relatively slow. So it might be interesting to see if it computes faster than it displays from the URL. Let's see if the geography one did anything. Still computing. Okay, I'll get back to this if we have more time. And I'm going to, oh, there we go. So you see this little bar at the top. This is showing you the progress in terms of computing the entire notebook. The idea is that it's just going to compute the whole thing, and then you can play with it afterwards. And I don't know how much interaction there is here. Yeah, there's a little. Come on. So we are racing the Wi-Fi against Julia at this point. I think Julia is going to win. There you go. I should say it's not just Julia. There is the Docker instance running on my laptop, and there is like 10 notebooks open. So this latency is a little overestimate. So just to illustrate the sort of things that we can now do with also GeoMachy is we have ways to, plot things in the ways that you might want to do that. The simplest is, of course, the lat long grid. But then, there's all sorts of projections that you can access. And I think in this case, I did it through just a projection package, but it's now built into the GeoMachy package. This is to illustrate something that we often need to do in our climate applications. We want to compute something like what I discussed before, ocean heat transport. So what that implies is you're doing the line along the grid, and then you're going to compute the integral of the vector flow fields across that grid. So you need to be able to figure out how those lines work out. I'm going to do a little change here to see it. So this is the little algorithm that figures out if I give you 2 points, this one and that one, that defines a great circle around the Earth. There is only one. If you do a small circle, that's defined by 3 points. but this is a grid circle. And then you see some staggering. That's because we are following the grid lines along this complicated grid that I talked about at the beginning. To show the structure of the grid a little bit more, these are for one of the faces of this 5-phase strange things that I talked about. These are the area of the grid cells. So you see that they are heterogeneous. Blue here is smaller. It's in units of log of meter square. And if I change this to say the case number 3, should be the one that's over the Arctic. You sort of guess that there are 4 corners to this array. Oh, I see. And I'm going to keep going. Let me do something else here, just to show you we can retile this domain, and we can sort of move around. So we can break it down into smaller pieces. We can do things like that. Change the size. So these are the sort of functionalities that are built into mesh arrays. And then we have basin masks. Those are the type of things you would do more generally by giving a polygon. And that's one of the things we could do in the hackathon. Here they are already pre-baked. So, and then we have also other things like that, like definitions of all of the major straits in the ocean where we want to know transports. So that lets us go to the vector part, which very briefly has crashed. So I'm going to go back to something else. And now to the notebook that was, what am I looking for? Yeah. I just wanted to go back to MBON. And so here what I did is I took a couple of the polygons that I found on the MBON website. One of them has this, I believe it's a seascapes climatology, but the metadata was not on the website, so I'm not entirely positive about that. So this is one of the polygons that I have available. Another one is this one. So these are the exclusive economic zones. You're going to see a few more regions. And for the hackathon, one of the activities we would propose to do is to take the exclusive economic zones around the Azores and then gather a bunch of data in there through some of the packages that we talked about before. All right. Yeah, there's a few more because every country has one, or every country that has a coastline has one. Come on. So this notebook uses the GeoJSON package to ingest the polygons. It uses GeoMaki to display along with CaroMaki. Any interactivity that you see when you see me clicking buttons here in these notebooks, it's coming from the Pluto UI. And then Dataverse is this API that I overloaded in Julia essentially to interrogate the database. So Dataverse is a data archive. I'm not going to illustrate it right now, but tomorrow we'll talk more about it. It can be integrated through both a REST API and a Python API. And what the Dataverse.gl package does at this point is no much more than just calling those from within Julia. Right, so here are the exclusive economic zones. So I'm not going to say more about this one. Yeah, except that there is Python dependencies that are getting installed on the fly. So it's an example of this notebook I think of integrating a bunch of different packages from different organizations that we have already talked about, from JuliaEO to JuliaGeo to Julia Climate and so forth. And what is the gathering data? Yeah. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to do on this one is Sorry. No, that's what I'm going to do on this one. So now we're going to move on to the second topic. And I think Adriano is going to, sorry, Andre is going to pick it up from there. I want to see this page. Oops. You're going to have to type it again, I think. I'm sorry. It might be in my notebook though.
No, I don't think you're.
Just. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Hi, everyone. So this is going to be actually just an introduction. Gael will just follow me soon because the idea here is just to show you some examples of the oceanography data that you can get from satellites. So one of the most important products for oceanography, operational oceanography, is the sea surface height, which is measured by altimeters. So it measures the height of the sea surface. So it's the anomaly, basically. So the ocean actually is composed by hills and valleys. What you are seeing here okay, so this is going to be frequent. What you are seeing here, the valleys are the blues, the hills are the red, and this is from satellites. And in the red ones, the water moves clockwise. And in the blue ones, it moves anti-clockwise. And in top of it, you have floaters, and you have two types of floaters here. And by the way, this is in Azores, you can see, and you see the mid-Atlantic ridge. So you have two types of floaters currently available freely. The ones that have a round shape are the floaters at the sea surface. These are basically driven by wind at the surface, so they move much faster. And the square ones and the triangle ones are actually Argos. So these are at around 1,000 meters, and every 10 days they come up and they take a profile. So you will see that the circles move quite fast. The others don't move because they are at 1,000 meters. And you can see in several occasions that they follow actually quite well these sea surface anomalies. And the other thing that you can see is that the mid-Atlantic ridge, you can see sometimes the floaters coming from the west, and they basically stop at the mid-Atlantic ridge, and they kind of get stuck somewhere in these areas. They just, if they cross it, they either cross it very fast or just stay there for a lot of time, bumping into this area. And it's quite interesting because these surface floaters are at the surface, and it's about 1,000 meters depth, these bathymetries. And the idea now is that to make these in Julia, and there are several packages to make these, and Gael will give you a short presentation on that, and then I'll be back after just present the other topic. Yeah.
All right. go back. So next notebook is this one then. So this is what I've gotten to so far in terms of reproducing this in Julia. So you're seeing again sea level anomalies and then contours that are the topography. So the ones that are most concentrated are the islands. And then you see also the shape of the seafloor. So this is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. These couple lines here, I opened them up to highlight the way that this Dataverse app API works. So you get a URL, which I'm not going to try to open this in the web browser, which is going to lead you to a web page on the Dataverse site. By providing the DOI, you get a data frames out of there, which will then give you a list of URLs via this second command. You can now select files. And if you're running this particular notebook on your instance on your container, this file might actually be missing. So you might get an error. And if you were in that situation, the notebook might complain. So you can change this and it should download the file for you. I have also put the files on the USB drives for this notebook. So you should be able to replace the path, which you see here, with the one that leads to the USB drive via the USB drive or via what you have now put inside of your container. You should find a set of files that are going to be, in my case, I've put them just here. There should be this file called SLA PODAC. This is the NASA version of altimetry of the sea level anomalies. CMEMS is the Copernicus version of the same thing. So we're going to be able to switch between the two. And this TIFF file is the one that has the topography of the seafloor and of the Azores in it. This last file is a NetCDF file that will give us the drifter datasets. So to make the notebook work, you want to have this path here, find your data folder, where those files I've just mentioned are. If it's not found, the notebook will download automatically, but because of our sort of slowish Wi-Fi here, that's going to be difficult. The people online should have less trouble with that ultimately. And so, what do I want to see? It doesn't matter. So the point of this notebook is to show you that we can already redo a fair amount of the work in Julia with just what's available to us in terms of packages. I've put a little thing there to switch. Doesn't seem to be doing anything though. That's strange. Maybe the notebook kernel died. Do that. So here you're looking at the code that just selects based on the value of this file that you get from the widget.
Just one question.
Yeah.
Which notebook are you running? Because I'm trying to figure out every fire around me looks like they're not. Which notebook you're
That's totally fair. Sorry for that. I am jumping around a bit. There is one that's called satellite altimetry.jl.
One that's on the Julia GitHub, right?
Yeah. So if you copy the URL, sorry, I totally forgot to say that. Thank you for the question. So I think it's, is it here? I need to find it myself. Okay, I just passed it.
It's on the grid of data.
On grid data here. Sorry.
Data sets.
Data. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So it's this one here, right? And so you want to get the URL. Yeah. And you want to grab the URL, not the HTML link. Go to your container and paste it here. I'm actually going to do that as well. So I'm going to be running the same notebook twice. That's okay. And so it's going to start showing up like this at the beginning. It should. And again, there's this little orangey thing over there that tells you how far along it is in pre-computing the notebook. Yeah, no, please interrupt me if you have any questions. This is the hands-on session, and I have a lot of things going on, so I'm forgetting things. Since I'm looking at this, the links to the data are here also, right? The data sources are included in the notebook. So if you click on this link, you will go to the topography that I've used. So I extracted a little piece of the so-called eTopo dataset. Woo. And this is the link to the NASA webpage for the sea level data, and the corresponding one from ESA, from Siemens. So what I ended up doing for preparing this notebook is I took these data sets that are global and I just cut out a piece so that you have a file that is not overwhelmingly big. Either one of those. Yeah, so I already had the files in place, so the notebook went fine. And if I do this, it should not be active. So you're going to see the resolution is going to change a little bit. I think one of the two data sets is daily and the other one is 5 daily. And their spatial resolution is also changing. So I think the one that is 5 daily might be the Siemens and might be higher resolution in space, whereas the daily is the PODAX or the NASA one, and then it's going to be daily. And right, and slightly coarser. Come on. Oh, no. There is in there a time series. So once you, I'm not going to touch this because otherwise it's going to trigger another computation. Once we have this file, we can cycle through it and then make a little movie. And so I have rendered the movie so that we would go faster and see it during the time of the presentation. This is the command that will regenerate the movie. I will fire it when this is done. Maybe the other copy of this notebook is already at that point. Probably this one. This was the first one. Oh, it's also computing. Okay, I'm going to kill one of them. I'm going to kill this one. Okay. So that's kind of what I had for this. Since this is computing and I might have a few more minutes, I'm going to go back to something I meant to show you in the first part, which was the climatology data from this biochemistry and ecology model output. So one of the things that I like to build with Pluto is interactive visualization like this. So this is just a notebook. You see zero code because it's all hidden, but then you see a bunch of widgets, which if I did not damage the, yeah, there you go. So this is running fine. So this is chlorophyll, for example, and you can just, go through the month. You can change the variable to something else. So let's say PAR, which is the photosynthetically available radiation, if I'm not mistaken. And so you can explore, the different wavebands of the satellites that we have translated in these remotely sensed radiances. There is something for salinity, so this would be that. And then there is a little bit more, which is this widget that lets you select a region, and then it's going to build a seasonal cycle from it. So from this notebook, we can generate little time series like this. And for the hands-on session, one of the things we can do is generate a little CSV file from that, which will give us a kind of a bunch of covariates over time. And we can start training things like a neural network with the flux.gl package we used before in the week to predict one variable from the others. Or we can try do another sort of machine learning exercise from that. And then you can do a few more things here. I don't know what this is. This is again selecting variables. Right, so then I guess the region I picked here was interesting. Let me go somewhere else. Right, so this reactivity that you see here is just baked into Pluto. And that's one of the reasons I think it's a really nice framework for communication. Jupyter has its own advantages, one of which is it does not require that the whole thing runs first, right? So in some cases, that's what you want. But for like interactive presentation, I find that both Mackie and Pluto give you options like this that are really nice and pretty easy to build. Typically, this is how you build the widget in Pluto. You just give it this one line of command, and that's it, right? At the end of that, you have a reactive feature, which is this variable that's going to propagate through the notebook. So it's extremely straightforward, I find, to build things like this. Coming back to my little thing here, has this actually? No, still hanging. Okay, never mind. So maybe I should leave it there for this part. No, I need to do one more thing, sorry. Oh, I do have time, okay. Good. So the next thing I wanted to show you for this part is the drifter data that Andre mentioned. So this is from, there's a link to the NOAA webpage, their FTP server. This is a globally coordinated effort to collect observations of velocities in the first place, but also temperature at the sea surface. So this is buoys, you see them here. This is one of them being put in the ocean, and then it's going to go around. It's going to follow the ocean currents. And on the left, you have kind of an example of a map of what those look like. So here is one of them that I've grabbed. I'm going to click on that boldly and see if it gives me what I want. But meanwhile, so you see on the left-hand side, the time series of the positions of this buoy, float, or drifter. There you go. So this is another one. So you might have noticed that it's very different. This case, right? The drifter, when this is in the Southern Ocean, I believe, and it's following the so-called Antarctic circumpolar current, just by eyeballing it. So you see that this drifter went from 75 degrees of longitude all the way to 175. So it's cruised around a third of the circumference of the Earth. And on the right-hand side, you see sort of the velocity estimates you get. These are the sort of time series you can build from this. And the first one we had, which I think was this one, instead only moved by about 20 degrees of longitude. And you see all of these sort of circles here. These are features in the ocean that are called eddies. They are the counterpart to your atmospheric storms. And that's what I was going to say on this. So we have access to these data sets through various ways. In this case, I'm using, again, standard packages, and I'm sort of doing the rest by hand. I have another notebook for this, which should I do that? I have another notebook for this, which I'm going to grab from the URL. Ooh. So I'm going to go back to this web page. And now we're going to look at data. Okay. So this one is actually not linked here for some reason. I forgot to do that. So I went to the GitHub repository for this. So this is in the Julia Ocean organization, Ocean Robots.jl. If you scroll down, you're going to find this little markdown file that has some folders in it. Yeah, I should say I tend to do that. I like foldable things in Markdown. And so if you go to surface drifters, you're going to find this first one we just looked at. And then there's this second one, but I'm going to get to it because I want the URL of the code itself this way. In the examples folder, I want to grab this one. So this is a more recent approach where colleagues at NOAA and associated institutions have been working on reformatting this data set to make it more easily available via cloud computing means. And also, I should say that this is a data set that has been processed such that it is at hourly resolution. So it, and it has SST at hourly resolution. So that's kind of unique, in fact, as far as I know. This is a data set that's going to have kind of quasi-global coverage and give us the daily cycle of temperature. That's kind of a hard thing to get to. So this one, I might not let it run all the way through, but it's going to interrogate this new format that they have. And it will, if it completes, oh, no longer running, okay. Okay, maybe I have too many at this point open. Okay. I'm getting myself in trouble. Let me open that again. Oh, it died. Okay, so it killed all of my notebooks, probably because there's a memory limitation that I did not pay enough attention to. So I'm just going to open it again. So this is a notebook that I adapted from somebody else's Python notebook that was from an effort funded by NASA. They have reformatted this data set such that it's now, instead of one little netcdf file per instrument, it's one big file, but it can be chunked and it can be accessed in a way where we're just getting a piece of the data set. And the next iteration of this, which we can look at later on in the hackathon, is that they are now putting this on S3, Amazon Cloud Services storage, so that you can then access all of this Let's see if I get to do that. Oh, what's up with that? I see. Okay. Let's start the notebook. Yeah, let's do that. I'll call this one. So I'm trying to locate my data, right? Struggling a little bit. Should be here. It's weird. Oh, just so once you have the right path here, and that's the file that I've put in on the USB drives, this GDP subset file. This particular notebook should then run. I did this preparation of a little file again to avoid having to get you to download more. So I sort of pre-canned everything. Now, the way this is set up is a little more interesting than the previous one. You get the data in a format that is a data frame with a Cartesian index with time, latitude, longitude, the SST variables, so on and so forth. And then what I did in this notebook was just replicate what the original authors had done. So again, if you go to this link here at the top, you will find the original notebook. So this is taking this data frame and then just grouping it by the indices, the Cartesian indices, and that's kind of all you have to do to get to a map like this where you have sort of rasterized your data set, essentially. And so I have a little helper functions at the end. Group by is just data frames.jl. I'm going to show you the other thing here, which is to grid. So this is just, you call the combine function against this straight up data frames.jl. And then there's just a tiny bit of post-processing to the average, I guess. No, to map the result of the combine operation, which is this df2 variable, a new data frame, to map that into an array so that I can then plot it. So in a way, the rasterization of these in situ data sets is greatly facilitated by data frames in itself. And we have seen this week solutions from rasters.jl and from other packages in the JuliaEO organization that will provide you with more elaborate and powerful methods, streamlining this process. The next thing here that I'm going to show you is this little command. So that's the one we're going to want to modify in the hackathon, for example, to get to the Azores region. Here, what I did was, or what they did, in fact, I copied it from their notebook, was I think a region in the Gulf of Mexico. And so this selected the trajectories from this big data set between two dates, so 20 years of data, and just extracts the subset, which is this data frame you see at the top, which is significantly smaller than this one. So this is the whole data set. It has about 5 million points in it. Once I go to my subdomain, I have 23,000. So if somebody in top of their mind head knows the coordinate of the Azores, we can put that in. I just don't know that. So let me just do. Just going to go. All right, let's go a little more north. Okay, so I'm at 25,000, and this is what I'm getting instead. So we will need to, verify that it's quite close enough to the regions. The idea would be to take this for a particular time period and put it on the map that we had seen before and combine the two. It might not have the whole time series, now that I think of it. So we might not be able to do the animation just with this subset. But if we had the global full data set, we should be able to then do this in sequence and build the movie like we see at the beginning. What else about this? Yeah, just so the notebook by my colleagues, Shen Lipa and the people working with him, also included the computation of frequency spectrum. And so this is what's shown here, replicated again in Julia. So it's mostly highlighting that we really know how to do these sort of things. So this is, this is just this computation basically. And then the rest is the plotting. Gives me a quick, opportunity to show you the Mackie code that plots, straightforward, right? And then FFT shift is from this FFTW package. So again, illustrating that in the Julia ecosystem, we have a lot of what we need to do state-of-the-art science today. I think I'm going to leave it here and hand it over to look at the Merida use case. Thank you very much. I hope this was clear enough. Sorry that I'm sort of bouncing around so much. Might have been a bit too bold on that.
Everyone, just a second. Okay, so now we are going into another hands-on. It's the random forest classification with Merida. I hope you will have the folder. There are 3 USB around. Who doesn't have it? Just say it, we will pass to you. So in that folder, you basically have the Julia, which you have to enter in Pluto, that one, and you have to put that input data folder into your data. Sorry? Sorry. No, I cannot. But if you need the pen drive, yeah, there are 3 pen drives around. You can ask. So you have two folders there: inputs and README, and this is the Julia that you will need. But I will come to this after, just for you to know beforehand. So what we are going to do is a random forest classification into a Sentinel-2 image for a special case, which is the detection of plastics, floating plastics accumulations. What you are seeing here is an image from Honduras, and so this is optical data. We have been talking about altimetry and also SAR. I think this is the first time we actually talk about optical data. Sentinel-2 measures reflectance at several wavebands in the visible and the infrared. And this is the RGB picture for this particular day in Honduras. You see several features. You see a turbid plume. You also see land. You see ocean. You see some boats. You see clouds. And you don't see it, but along the front of the river, around here, you can see some structures bright. And what is this? Is those carpets of plastic. So this is a very affected area about plastic pollution. Every time there is big river runoff, it's on TV. You might have seen it before. I have provided some links in the README folder so that you can see. So, what is Sentinel-2? What is this Sentinel-2 image? So basically, you have reflectance in several bands. The B1 is blue, green, red, and then it comes into the infrared. So reflectance is the satellite is seeing the sunlight reflected at the surface and also in the atmosphere that is reflected upwards. So the sensor is measuring this reflectance. Is basically the amount of sunlight reflected on the sea surface. It measures this at the top of the atmosphere. So to reach the reflectance at the sea surface, you have to make several processings, namely atmospheric correction. And there are two main components, the Rayleigh correction and also aerosol. The Rayleigh is the most easy, the aerosol is the most difficult because it's quite variable and we don't have enough data to do this. So it's a step, it's one of the most difficult steps. So typically you can use this one or the top of the atmosphere reflectance easier. And one of the reasons why we are using Rayleigh, it's because the spectral library I'm going to show, it's also Rayleigh reflectance. We did this, so we download this image, we processed it with the acolyte atmospheric correction to get this Rayleigh reflectance. And then we apply already some masks. So in the input folders, you will have the geotiffs already masked, something like this. We mask the land, we mask clouds with another algorithm, and we also masked most of the pure water, the marine water, the water that doesn't contain nothing on top. There is nothing floating. It's just you can do this by the reflectance. So basically, these are the masks, just for you to understand. The land mask from well-covered, the cloud mask from S2 cloudless, and the clear water mask. In the left side, everything is considered clear water except the turbid plume. And also you can see those filaments in the center, which are the supposedly plastic accumulations. And so you get these. We are just going to process these pixels in blue. And so the objective is to get something like this, where we have a classification in each pixel of what corresponds. In this bottom, you see the masks. I did it with some different colors for you to understand. You have the sediment-laden water in the mouth of the river. You have some false positives of floating organic matter and floating sargassum around the clouds, because as you can see, these are nearly transparent clouds. So they are quite difficult to, one way is just to increase the buffer of this cloud mask that will take most of these false positives. But I'm leaving them here so that you understand. And then in the end, you get these classifications of plastics around here. And we also have other classes like foam, pure marine water. These ones are actually from the mask marine water. And this is so how do we do this? We do this with the random forest. We actually did a notebook for this hands-on, which is that one. We have this workflow and we just adapted these steps for Julia. What am I going to show more? Okay, so here in the inputs, here you have just a brief description of what I said. We will train a random forest model using Merida spectral library. Okay, so this is the quite recently. Yeah, this one I can. Okay. Better? Okay, I'm just going to explain you. So this is the spectral signatures from Sentinel-2 of several classes. Merida provides several classes: clouds, sargassum, foam, marine debris, marine water, sediment, water, ships. So basically, the challenge is because you have a lot of overlapping between classes. And for example, plastics, marine debris, which you see in red, it's quite close to several other features. So the challenge here is to use machine learning to try to understand from each pixel which class it is. You can read this to understand. You have this event. You can see the movie. You can see these carpets of plastics. And so this is the image. And so basically the inputs of this notebook will be 2 text tables, train and text, where you have the spectra for each class. There are thousands of spectra for each class. And we already modified this a bit. We made the super classes and we removed some other classes just to make it faster and easier. And then you also have the explanation I told you about the mask. Okay, so this is what you've seen before. And now Emmanuel is going to give you just a quick overview of that notebook, which we could try to also tackle in the hackathon if you have interest. Okay, Emmanuel, come. I think we are on time.
Is it big enough for everyone? So hello, everyone. My name is Emmanuel. I will present here a short Pluto notebook about the random forest classification using the Merida dataset. That is a huge marine debris dataset with around 800,000 spectral signatures extractions. I am expecting that you have already the notebook on your computers. And I hope too that the data is circulating on a USB stick. I can show a bit how my container is, the setup of my container, because I did a small change in here. I am linking the data folder, but also another one that I called other notebooks. So because the notebooks are always changing, I put them in here, and the data I'm putting here. So I have the data of everyone's notebooks, and I have mine that is called inputs. And inside inputs, I have the bands indices of Sentinel-2 that were pre-processed, as Andre explained. And this will be your example image. Inside the train and test datasets, I have the train and the test that I also pre-processed, because if I use here 800,000 points, this would crash from time to time. So I reduced to 20,000. So before running the notebook, you will need to check the path, the initial path, to see if inside the data folder you have the inputs folder with the bands, indices, and the train test datasets. At the beginning, the Pluto notebook will need some time to precompile the packages. The packages are here at the end. So I'm using data frames, data frames to work with the data that I load from the CSV. ArcGDAL, but okay, this week I know that rasters GL maybe can be a good option. Decision tree, images too, and Maki also maybe it's a good option for here. So is the notebook of anyone loading? Still loading? Yeah, this can take some time. Yeah, the directory is home Jovian data. And I'm assuming that you are putting the inputs inside the data. The inputs folder inside the data, like this one over here. Data, inputs. In my case, the notebook is on another folder, but can be on data too. So, going to read the train and the test data. So I'm reading here the both CSVs. Here I'm just visualizing one of the data frames and only the hat 5. That includes some of the bands of Sentinel-2 and some indices that were spectral indices that were pre-calculated, and the class num. For example, for this first observation, it's this class for this spectral signature and for this indices. This is something that is already in Merida and ready to use, only need some changes. Here I prepared the train and test data. For the train, I removed the class num because the class num will be included in the Y train. Here I didn't do a cross validation. This also can be done to choose the best hyperparameters. For this, you will need to split into a third data set that you can call the validation. Yeah, the test data 2, just to plot a confusion matrix to check the accuracy of the model. As I said, I didn't use cross validation in this example, and I used some of the hyperparameters that are used in Merida, like the number of trees, the max depth. Here, not taking too much into consideration the overfit. And this step here is the step that can take more time processing, and sometimes can crash Docker. And if it's happening to you, you can run on your computers. That maybe will be better, but this takes some time to train. Here, I'm just applying the train model to the test data to then plot a confusion matrix. I created a different function that I didn't include here that creates a confusion matrix that is normalized and it is in a heat map. Because I was struggling to find a package that have a confusion matrix function ready to use. I think I found one called Lighthouse. So I needed to calculate on my own. At the beginning, this was using Python to calculate this confusion matrix, but then I changed to this one that is not normalized, but that you can see here, that presents quite good predictions or classification of the classes that I will tell you. Here, some of the, for example, oh, not here. Okay, here, for example, for example, I created a prepared data for classification that I will show you later, this function. And what this does is reads all the TIFF files that are on your example image, Sentinel-2 image, and does some preparing that includes the conversion of types and not the numbers too. Yeah. Here, because of the removal of the not the numbers from the data frame, because some packages have problems predicting when the data frame has not the numbers. So I remove them. And to not lose the geolocation, I created an index num column. So I removed the rows of the data that have the not the numbers. And for example, the index column is 1, 2, 3, 4. If I remove a not a number on 3, it will be 1, 2, 4. And then after prediction, I will add this the index column again. It's just a method to not lose geolocation. Maybe there is another one that is more efficient, but this was the one that I found to work on my code. Yeah, because here it's the global data frame. Let's say that it's the number of pixels that our example image has. It's quite some. And then I need to predict that image, but without the not the numbers. And this is what I do here. I filter the not the numbers, create the index column, the index num column. Yeah. And then the number of pixels to process that will be reduced. This will be the number of pixels to process. So now I'm here, predicting the image, the example image. It's quite fast, 36 seconds. Maybe yours is still compiling. Yeah, because of the packages. Yeah. And I will show this some of my defined functions below. But for example, this one creates the scene classification map. And here enters the number of global pixels, the index column, predict. And then it's just to save this scene classification map as a raster. And here I'm just doing a simple side by side of the RGB and the classification. This plot, I didn't put coordinates on this plot. Maybe it will be a good idea to put it. And also, maybe this is a thing that can be leveraged by Maki. Yeah, it's over here, the marine debris, but it's a bit small. Oh, it's small here. Yeah, but it has the sediment-laden water, well classified. Because this is a river, it has some vegetation too. The marine water, and here, as Andrea explained, because of the clouds can interfere with this. So passing to the some of my defined functions, like this one of the scene classification map. I try to document them as much as possible. Yeah. As I say here, it's good. It builds the final classification map using the data frame from the example image. And taking into consideration that index num column to not lose the geolocation. Yeah, and then just also the reshape. The reshape of the data frame to be then printed outputted on the right of the TIFF. This is the prepared data for the classification that reads the TIFF files here using ArcGDAL. All these pixels are reshaped to a single column. Yeah. And they are also they are stacked like band 1, band 2, band 3, band 4. They are well, the images transform, each of the TIFF of the bands are transformed into a single column, and then they are all stacked so they can be classified to apply in the classification. Yeah, finally is the save the raster as TIFF if you want, for example, to open on QGIS. It's saved as a unassigned integer 8 bits. Then it's just a simple plot of the RGB image side by side with the scene classification. And here I read the band 4, that is the red, the band 3, that is the green, the band 2, that is the blue, and the scene classification map that was saved on the previous step. Change a bit of the brightness of the image. Created the RGB using these 3 separated files. Apply the white to the not the numbers. In this case, it's not necessary to resize the RGB image. And apply a color. This here is a color palette for the scene classification map. 0 is the no data. The marine debris I put as red here in this part here as red. Yeah. So if it's value 1, it needs to be accepted. It needs to be divided by 255. If it's like this, I put as red. This is just a color palette that can be changed. And here is just the side by side of the RGB and the scene classification image. Still compiling or still loading? Okay, perfect. Well, this is what I had to present. I don't know if you have some questions.
Also in the dialogue session, like if we have any general questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
So questions for the 3 speakers? Microphone, please.
I also accept suggestions to improve the classification algorithm.
Yeah, I think we will also in the hackathon we'll continue both with the history and hands-on sessions. Definitely. So, no questions? Thank you very much. I think we are close to the end of the session, so.
Okay, so we have lunch at noon. Then we come back at 1 for the general hackathon on characterization of marine ecosystems from space using artificial intelligence. Yes. Yes. For those who are online, thank you for following this day. We then close this session and we see you tomorrow. Thank you.